Hi, this is David at Mash IT. We spent the last few days heavily playing with these new M1 MacBook Pro and MacBook Air models. We put out a couple of videos on the performance and also an unboxing for each of these machines. I've been thinking long and hard about how on earth to review these laptops, because the difficulty is, with these machines, they're both exactly the same externally as last year's models. So there's no point me talking about the externals. If you've seen any MacBook for the last year or two, you're going to know what these look like. You're going to know what ports they've got. So realistically, the only difference is the internals. So you've got to ask yourself, which do I buy, the Pro or the Air? They've both got the M1 processor, and from our testing of the performance, they both perform almost identically. Both of these laptops have the Apple Silicon M1 processor. They're both spec-wise almost identical. This is the base model MacBook Air. It's fanless. It has one less GPU than the MacBook Pro. The MacBook Pro, it has the same M1 chip, 8 CPU cores and 8 GPU cores. The MacBook Pro has a fan. Realistically, that is about it. If you upgrade the MacBook Air to the top tier of the standard build to orders, you'll also get the 8 core and 8 GPU cores, making it even more closer to the MacBook Pro. And in that one, the only difference is the MacBook Air does not have a fan, the MacBook Pro does have a fan. So when I got these laptops in thinking, the MacBook Air is fanless, this is going to be heavily throttled, so I'm obviously going to recommend the MacBook Pro because the fan is going to give that fantastic performance compared to the Air. Surprisingly, it doesn't. And this is where it makes it now really difficult for me to review these laptops and recommend one over the other because they are pretty much the same. Only when you are running an extended CPU or GPU test does the MacBook Pro come out ahead of the Air. Because if you're running just simple tasks, the fans won't run on the MacBook Pro, and this doesn't throttle at all. Apple have done an absolutely incredible job with this M1 processor. I don't think anyone's expecting them to come out and perform as well as they have done. Now, we have done a MacBook Pro M1 versus the 2020 13-inch 10th gen Intel processor. I can pop that in the comment section down below. And the M1 CPU, or the M1 Apple Silicon, destroyed Intel in every category. So if you're going to buy a new laptop now, you really, I think, unless you need boot camp or unless you need lots of monitors or an external GPU, you really should be looking at the new Apple Silicon. They are amazing machines. So then I'm thinking to myself, how do I recommend one over the other? Well, realistically, the only thing left now is pretty much the cost. Because they've now given the MacBook Air the P3 screens and also the MacBook Pro is the P3 screen. The Air has 400 nits, whereas the Pro has 500 nits. Now the extra 100 nits is nice, but in most uses, you're probably not going to notice that extra 100 nits unless you are really in a really bright environment. The MacBook Pro's biggest selling feature over the Air is the touch bar. And having used this for the last few years, I cannot see why Apple have still kept it on this laptop. If anybody uses and enjoys the touch bar, please put some comments in down below because I cannot find a decent use for it. For me, I find it more frustrating because I have to keep enabling it, trying to fumble around to click the keys I want. The Air with the old-fashioned function keys, it works so well still. You've got all your media keys, brightness, keyboard brightness, all at a touch of a button that's easy to touch, feel, you learn where they are, they're always there. It's brilliant. Also, with the Air, you've got the nice, very slight taper, which makes it easier to pick up and also gives it a slightly better typing incline. Both the machines have the same keyboard, both have the same pretty much touchpad. The Pro does have a very slightly bigger battery, and the Pro does have the fan, so it will throttle slightly less if you're using it under sustained heavy load. But this performs so well, I can't see the need for either of those for the extra £300 you're going to be spending for the Pro. So in all honesty, there's no part of me that can recommend the Pro over the Air unless you absolutely need that 500 nit screen and you really like the touch bar. Everything else is the same. Now, I've been using these solidly for the last couple of days, and I do think the Apple Silicon M1 is an amazing machine, and I definitely want one myself. I think what Apple will be doing is releasing a high-end Pro. So I think if you want a Pro, at the moment, I would hold out if you can and wait for them to release the 4-port high-end, whether it's M2 or whatever they're going to call it over the next few months. I'm sure that's going to be happening. But if you are buying now, I would wholeheartedly recommend you buy the MacBook Air. Well, I think that has to be our quickest review. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please let me know what you think. What are your thoughts? Would you buy the Pro or the Air? Please also like and subscribe and hit the notifications bell because there will be more content coming and you will then be notified of that. But as for now, thank you for watching I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm taking the gold. I love gold.